Good evening and welcome to another episode of Hot Topics. We are so excited to have you with us and we're so excited to have our guests. Today we'll be looking at part 2 of male privilege.
Thanks, Rebecca. We just want to allow everyone a chance to introduce themselves, especially our guests, in case you missed them last week. If you haven't watched last week's, we want to encourage you to go and have a look at last week's Hot Topics, as this conversation will carry on from where we left off last week. And so, Sia, can I ask you to start?
Hello, the name is Siabulela Tonono. I am a black man. I'm a researcher, part activist. I don't know what I am, but yeah, that is my conversation, or my thoughts. That's what I present to this conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is Nangamso Mangai, otherwise known as Nan. I am going to be looking at this from the lens of a black woman, and my experiences in life, in corporate, in church, in the various spaces that I live in.
Great. I'm Rebecca Rivas. I am a volunteer at Gracepoint, and I am part of the Hot Topics team. And yeah, I'm coming from a very privileged and obviously white background, and that will be where I'll be speaking from today.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hey, everyone. My name is Ilza. I'm part of the Hot Topics team and also here at Gracepoint. So today's conversation, I'm going to be looking at from the angle of youth and youth development. I work a lot with children, so we'll be looking at that from my perspective today as well.
Morning, everyone. My name is Hloni Lehohanolo, part of the Hot Topics team and team here at GP. And I'll be looking at today's conversation as an activist, but also as someone who really thinks around women issues from a theological perspective.
Amazing. So last week we looked at the historic origins of male privilege. We also looked at practices that perpetuate male privilege. And I think that last week, for myself, it was a learning curve in so many different people's experience, because I have grown up, like I said, very privileged, and I've also grown up around women. My mom has been a very strong figure, and my gran, and my mom is also one of 3 girls, so it's been very female-orientated. And listening to the experience of everyone seated here, I have been extremely privileged. And I think last week, we're going to get more into it today, also how white women and black women face different forms of oppression. While I am oppressed, I am still also an oppressor, whereas that is completely different for Nan. So I just want to start us off today with defining male privilege within our modern culture. So I'm just going to give, when I hear that, just maybe what I understand from it, then we can go around and maybe speak of that. When I think of male privilege and when I think of the female body, I don't go immediately to the hunter and gathering, how women stayed behind, men went out to find food. I don't immediately think about the fact that women didn't have the right to vote for so long. I don't immediately think of the fact that women earn less than men. I think of more of the microaggressions. You know, Ilse and I were just talking about how someone will say, oh my goodness, you fight like a girl. Or someone will be like, that's so girly, as an insult. Where actually a woman's body is used as an insult and not as a compliment. I was reading this article on Money on Monday with Hloni. We hold a book club light, and someone called this lady a feminist, and she turned around and said, but it wasn't a compliment. It's a dirty word, you know, and a lot of the time female attributions are actually used to tear people down. You know, don't cry like a little girl. You know, and that's more what I think of when I'm thinking of male privilege, and which is a privilege in itself, because we have people all over the globe who are experiencing it on a violent level. Also in South Africa with our gender-based violence. But that's what I first think of, is these microaggressions that chip away at the female body. Yeah, so Sia, could you start maybe with your experience, maybe not experience, but your understanding of male privilege in a modern society?
I think it all boils down to how boys are conditioned and raised. From a very young age, boys are conditioned into the idea of their own supremacy. We're conditioned into a superiority role that then which is anchored in all forms of society. I mean, it is emphasized everywhere. You look at popular music, you look at pop culture, all of the sort of media depictions of what is acceptable from boys and what is not acceptable. And again, like you said, the fact that many a times there's so much subliminal messaging that says to boys that you are entitled to power. And the unfortunate thing about that entitlement to power is that the world we live in, sadly, does not give little boys power as they grow up. And one of the issues that happens then is that because now there is for a long time you've been told that you are entitled to power, and your experience is saying now, hang on, I'm not getting this power. And one of the ways in which we are socialized is this idea that you as a man must always show force, violence. So at the first sight of any disagreement, the best way, the only acceptable way for you as a man to express yourself is either through aggression. Actually, only through aggression. You are only allowed to express anger. So when that kind of a boy who's been socialized into privilege, into expecting that he must be powerful, and comes into a corporate world, it comes into a world that says, you're not special. There's resistance immediately. And the only tool that boy has is aggression, because it's the only socialized form it's the only acceptable form of the male emotion. You cannot show any other form of emotion as a man. It's the only, so aggression and anger are the only things that we can say, that's okay. And what do we call it when a man is angry at a meeting? We say he's passionate. He's not just being cynical. He's not being crazy. No, he's a passionate guy.
I think for me, Rebecca, and thanks for that, Sia. For me, I think in the modern day environment, I'm one of those people who someone called me a feminist the other day, and I was like, no, I'm not. I'm just stating what I think is right. And I think it starts off, as both of you have said, in how little girls and little boys are conditioned. I'm one of those people, my friends know, of course I will every now and again, but I intentionally don't buy my friends' daughters tea sets and dolls, because I'm like, no, you are going to be an engineer, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an actuary, you're going to be an accountant, you're going to be whatever. Purely because I think it's exactly that point to then sort of say we start unintentionally conditioning our minds that there are certain roles we're more suited to, purely because of our gender. And I think, for me, it's being intentional in how we start conditioning our minds and those little girls that are in our, environments. Because I also find, and I had this discussion with somebody the other day, where I asked, so this notion of male privilege and that you are superior, how does it affect boys or men who are actually sensitive, who now must suppress who they are so that, they fulfill this, this notion? So I do think in the modern day, we really, our age or our generation the information's been filled in then, as I guess the case of tossing out what we don't want, but we need to now be intentional about the messaging we give to the younger ones.
Yeah, and I think it's so important what both of you have said. I have personally said to my brother and to other males, man up, or don't cry, And I'm not going to lie to you, I get uncomfortable around men who cry. And I've had to do some introspective work as to why that is. And that's because we've been conditioned in society that women cry, women show emotion, and men are just almost meant to carry this invisible emotional thing. But not to, I think those are two separate issues, but they're important issues, and that we, as society, we need to raise our kids differently. We need to raise our women differently, and we need to raise men differently, because this whole stronger, better thing is just not true anymore.
100%. I mean, I think you've raised very valid points around parenting and how we've conditioned our society. And I think another side of it is, if we look at the definition of privilege, it's the unearned advantages. So by virtue of that definition, then male privilege would be the advantages that men then get simply because they're male. And that's not to deny that men have hardship. It's not to deny that they don't have, and they're not oppressed in other senses, because our identity is more than just our gender. There's so many aspects of identity, and so we can face privilege on one aspect of identity, and we can find oppression on another aspect. But simply like women are often then, because men have these advantages that they have, because they are men, women have the opposite, which is the oppression side of it. Women are conditioned by society to submit. It's always been, growing up, I think a lot of women experience that it's a case of, if you were to, for example, go to your mom and ask her for something, some households would be, go ask your dad. Go ask your dad. Okay? Why must I go ask my dad, I understand there's a lot of things around parents should be in agreement with how they raise their children, and that's an aspect of the conversation. But when this motivation or the idea behind go ask your dad is because he's the head of the household, he has the final say, that's problematic. And so we need to kind of deconstruct our ideas around male and female roles as well.
Thank you. So when I think of privilege, I really wish we had not had a week between last week and this week, when which gave one an opportunity to really internalize some of these things. But when I think about the whole idea of male privilege, there is a part of me that sometimes wants to problematize it, because as one, I think male privilege is a very blanket statement when there are different forms of males. Sia, for instance, I think it was last week where you spoke about this hierarchy, this hierarchy that even Fanon even speaks of, how society has been constructed, and you've got the white male. We're not sure what's in between as to how when society plays out, whether it's the white female or the black male. There are instances where, as a black male, I feel like I've been given this thing of male privilege, but it's an incomplete package. I'm meant to have it. I'm expected to have it, but I do not always have I do not always have access to some of the tools that are meant to come with it. A typical example: go ask your dad. There are households where it's irrelevant. It's an irrelevant statement because you can't ask your dad, because your dad does not even have the financial power to give a yes or a no.
But I think on that, you speak about something very important, about the incomplete package that you've been handed. Now put yourself in my shoes. There is no package.
Absolutely.
There is no package. And I laughed the other day. I had to get a delivery from something I'd ordered. And I can't remember how we ended up here. And the gentleman ended up asking, so are you going to sign for it? Is your husband going to? And I'm like, what? So you speak about incomplete privilege. As a black woman, I find that I find myself having to fight for every space I occupy. And even when I'm not fighting, so Rebecca and I could walk in here and we are passionate about the same thing. And it's okay where she's concerned, but where I'm concerned, I'm just seen like as, a bull in a china shop, because whatever I say is almost perceived as me being defensive and fighting, even when I'm not.
And I think just to add on this quickly, I speak of like me being an oppressor too lightly, actually, because the truth is, it's not like I am just a little bit oppressed less than you, less than you, sorry. There's actually a massive gap between you and I, where we're both women, okay, and we face some similar battles. But the truth is, you face so much more than me. So just for a quick example, our hair, okay, in school, okay, I never did my hair. You must understand this. I was a lazy kid. Also, you probably weren't like that. Eh? No, but I'd have the messiest buns. Actually, a bun is embarrassing to call it. And I remember in my grade 11 year, I dyed my hair luminous red. Okay, not like it was an unnatural red. You could see that it was, and a teacher never said a thing to me. Okay. One of my black friends had her natural hair, and she hadn't relaxed it. She got called into the principal's office for not relaxing her natural hair, and it was called untidy. Okay, here I am with luminous red hair falling out everywhere. A teacher never said a word, and that's obviously almost like a trivial example, whereas actually we could walk into a room and we're applying for the same job. I'm telling you, I've experienced it. I am given more respect. And maybe you could just speak on that quickly about your experience, and then Ilse.
Sorry, I think on that, I laugh on that because I think I had this conversation with you, Hloni, on something else recently, and I said, I'm intentionally very radical with my hair now, even in corporate. Believe me, I love relaxed hair because it's just, for me, it's easier to manage. But I'm intentional about the hairstyles I wear for that exact reason. That because we have been made to believe that for us to be worthy as black women, this is the box we must fit in. These are the ticks we must make. You know, that's the point. And also, I think, as you rightfully say, Rebecca, it's you walk in, and comments like, "Oh, you're so well spoken," or "You're so this," are said. And those who know me very well know I probably have a pushback to that. But that's my personality. That's got nothing to do with me, you know. And it's almost like I am expected to be the worst of the worst. Even black men view me that way, and me being a black woman. So, you know, I must forever be on this trying to redeem myself cause, even amongst black men, because I'm a black woman and I'm sort of viewed, as, the bottom of the rung.
Thanks for that, Nan. So what I wanted to get us kind of back to was what Rebecca was speaking about around, at school, those types of things, looking specifically at male privilege. And maybe school is very far back for some of our people that are looking, but kind of behaviors that perpetuate male privilege, whether it's in an institution, whether it's in a church. So just to, like I'm saying about the church, about the school, to think, when I was at school, we would go to school and we'd have to have a uniform inspection. But that uniform inspection was very different for boys and for girls. The boys were looked at, have they shaved, and do they look tidy in general. The girls' nails were checked. The girls' skirts lengths were checked, and there was different advantages that the guys had that the girls didn't have. So that would be an example of a type of behavior that kind of perpetuates male privilege because it almost encourages sexism in a way.
But remember...
to hear from you, Sia.
Lisa, here's the idea around patriarchy is that women are objects. Patriarchal thinking says women are objects, regardless of their race. And so they must always be, the white woman must be protected. The black woman has got an element of rapeability about her, so there's really not much to that. So that's the sort of the dominant kind of thinking. And because women are not seen as beings, it's always in relation, and patriarchal society structures such that we're always in relation, women are always placed in relation to men. And that is the fundamental problem because it gives, the burden of patriarchy is as exhausting to men, if not more, as it is to women, because we constantly have to live up to these standards that men don't cry, or these sort of patriarchal standards that just are so out of reach for everyone.
I'm just going to disagree with you just on your one point, quickly. Sorry, Nan, I saw you going. I think we just must be careful in terms of the word exhausted. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let me just explain to you what I mean. And I think maybe I understand what you're saying. For example, I've been taught to walk, if I'm walking by myself, to hold my keys in between my fingers so that if I'm attacked, that I have some form of protection. I've been told not to wear a skirt too short just in case it entices men. I've been told that I must tone it down because it makes me less recognizable in a crowd, therefore makes it less likely for me to be attacked. I've been told that the way I wear my hair, the type of earrings, I was wearing hoops one day, and some hoops. Okay, I was wearing hoops one day, and someone said to me, you know what they say about hoops? And I said, you know what I've learned now, just to play dumb, when people say something sexist. So they have to explain themselves. No, I don't know what they mean by hoops. You know, the bigger the hoop. I said, yeah? I said, continue. The bigger the hoop. And he was instantly uncomfortable because he knew that it was an insane thing to say. So I understand where you go. There is this exhaustion when it comes to toxic masculinity. There's toxic masculinity, and it's something we need to deal with. But I think comparing it to the female experience...
I think, sorry.
I think this point was missed. I last time. So it's something that Sia speaks about that's very critical.
Okay.
When we speak about male privilege and we say Nan is at the bottom, we need to understand that even Nan's children, regardless of their gender, will equally feel the pinch and the hit of the privilege deficit that is experienced by Nan.
Yeah.
And this is something that was neglected by the government when we started programs such as Take a Girl Child to School. Very important program, very important. But what we fail to acknowledge is that the black lad is equally in trouble because he's a perpetrator, but at the same time, he's a victim. He is in a very difficult space. And this is why you've got so many black lads right now in society with this power. They've been told that they're entitled to power, but they do not have the resources that come with this privilege that they've been told that they have. And so I think it's for me, that's where I think when we speak about male privilege, we need to also acknowledge its complexity. That male privilege what male privilege means for a white male is not what male privilege means for a black male.
100%.
I think, and I take that point, Hloni, and I agree with you there. I think also, back to Ilse's point, is I've also had the hoop thing. And unfortunately, the sad part of it is also it's perpetuated amongst women. So my mom, as strong and as amazing as she is, at the other occasion, she'd be like, you can't wear that. And I'm like, why not? She's like, ladies don't do that. And it's exactly that same point to then say, and I said this last week, we need to really be intentional about what we say and how we say it. When you say, we had the same thing at school, it was the length of your skirt, it was 5 fingers above your knee, it was your,
5?
Yeah. No, it was 5.
I was 4.
I think it might have been 4. But it was 4. It didn't matter that the boys were untidy. I had to tuck in my shirt. It was studs, and it was certain types of studs, and from that moment, when we start telling somebody that, and it's with school picture day, it was girls sit cross your legs. Doesn't matter how the boys are like.
And we had to freeze. We had to wear skirts with socks.
With socks. And you're like, and you must, and you start telling these things to a little girl. Yes, we might be radical in our thinking, and you might, refuse to comply to some of them. But some of them stay with you in your subconscious. There are certain times when I have to call myself out on what I've been told. Not because at least I don't think I took mind of it at the time when it was said, but it creeps up in how I view myself. And for me, the thing about male privilege and female, females being seen as a lower sex is really about, we need to, there's a lot of unwinding that needs to happen, even in my mind, I'll admit, because there are times when I have to catch myself. I think Rebecca spoke about it, about how sometimes as women we oppress each other, where I would say something and be like, Rebecca, you can't. And then I have to call myself out, because who says she can't purely because she's a woman?
And I think the issue here for me, at least the one that I harp on about, is the patriarchal burden on men. Let's look at the South African statistics on murder, for example. About 20,000 murders a year. About 4,000 of those are women and children. 16,000 are men. If you look at those demographically, a bulk of that 16,000 are black men. If you go to any public hospital on a weekend, it is flooded by men who were stabbed, shot, had involved in car accidents. Why? Because society has this idea that as a man, you take risks, you do stupid things, it's your right, go on ahead. And so the point I'm trying to get at is that on the weight of it all is just as brutal, or if it's got a brutal element to it, that we can't, that even men, in as much as they try to sort of maintain this privilege, but the maintenance of this whole system is just tiring on its own because we're chasing ideals we don't live up to.
So you're saying are you saying we should park the male privilege fight
Yeah.
and then focus on the fact that black men are carrying a lot? Is that what you're saying?
No. What I am saying, Nan, is that patriarchy as a whole is brutal on everyone, from a different angle, and therefore it makes no sense. My view is that the only difference is that it gives men a little trinket of sweets, but it is brutal.
But I think we also need to. So I'm not sure of the facts that you just spoke about, but I have no doubt that they're right. But we also can't ignore the fact that every 3 minutes, a child or woman is raped. And in 2017, every 4 hours a woman was murdered. In 2020, it's every 3 hours. Okay, so while I can appreciate, and actually no, appreciate is actually the wrong term. There is a burden on black men when it comes to male privilege. And where I am absolutely in agreement with both of you is that white male privilege and black male privilege are vastly, vastly different. And in the same way that Nan and I will have different experiences, black men and white men will have completely. I remember there was this thing at one point where people were so worried that their white sons weren't going to get a job. Do you remember that? I think it still is like that now, where people are like, I'm just so worried my son's not the right skin color. I'm just so worried. Which is not true. It's not true, because it actually is who you know, not what you know. You know, those circumstances are just, I don't want to name places, but where your dad works, and let's say you've studied the same thing, there's almost a guaranteed position for you in that position, or in a brother company or a sister company. So let's not make muddy water here. Black men and white men have different privileges. But the truth is, we're fighting 2 pandemics in South Africa. Firstly, coronavirus. Secondly, gender-based violence. And that can't be ignored. Gender-based violence is a pandemic. And I want to put a spotlight on that, and on... Go for it, Hloni.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. I think we are missing Sia's point. There is a part where Biko says, black people are meant to be saved so that these are not the exact words, but black men should be saved so that they can also go on to save white people. What he's speaking about is that it's only dehumanized people who go on to dehumanize another person.
Wow.
And therefore, we need to acknowledge that those who are the oppressor is more dehumanized than the person they are dehumanizing. And therefore, those who are oppressed, the oppressor is more dehumanized than the person they are dehumanizing, than those they are oppressing.
But we're
I
dying.
don't think I agree
with
with
that.
that.
Dehumanizing, we're dying.
But my point is, patriarchy is not a blessing to either. Man might think it's a blessing. Man might be stupid. Let me put it bluntly. Man might be stupid to think that patriarchy is a blessing. But it is not a blessing. It is taking them away from their core sense of being. The principle of Ubuntu is being able to mutually enable life in another so that they can also do the same. That is the relationship. But once you've lost your personhood, once you are no longer a human being, once you've lost yourself completely, you lose the ability to do that and you go on and kill and oppress people. And therefore, as much as you are a problem, you are equally a victim that is writing yourself down. You're basically killing yourself. It's a suicidal thing to keep. Patriarchy is problematic.
I think that I can agree. I completely understand what you're saying. No, I don't. I don't completely understand. I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
I think that where I would disagree, if I even have a right to disagree on this, is that I can get behind what you're saying if Black and white men never use their privilege, their male privilege, in any situation. So I can get behind you because I do believe in what you're saying. I don't know how much I agree with you about the person that they're oppressing being more. I don't think I agree with you there, but I need to wrap my thoughts around that. Okay. But if you can say to me that male, Black or white, will never use their male privilege, okay, I agree with you. But unfortunately, I disagree with you. And I think that brings us back to the church, or at least places of work, church, somewhere where I have experienced by men them using their privilege to get above me.
Of course.
Ilsa.
I think it's definitely not just like to get above you, but there's certain things where, so I want to come back to this gender-based violence thing, where like the voices of women, now you said we're the ones being killed, women, but the voices of women are not being heard. But when a man stands up against gender-based violence, suddenly the voice is heard. Those are examples of male privilege that we can find. And I think if we kind of start wrapping up and heading towards the end, we start to think of the example of Jesus, how Jesus didn't silence the voices of women. Instead, he gave women a platform or a voice. We can see like Mary, when she came and she broke the jar and poured oil on Jesus' feet, how immediately the disciples wanted to silence her and say that you have no place here. This is a male circle. This is a male context. You have no place here. But Jesus allows her in and invites her voice to be heard.
And I think to that, Ilse, I would just want to add, there's this notion of a boys' club. And whether it's because you all went to the same high school together, you all play rugby together, whatever it is, it carries on throughout life. And it's especially in the workplace. And the problem you then find is, I don't like rugby just because I don't like things that get you dirty. That's just me.
You're missing out on
I play golf every now and again, but I am nowhere near. It's just when I need to clear my mind. But I'm not going to spend every single Saturday in a golf course freezing and walking for 18 holes. I'm not going to do it. It's just not me. And you then find now, for me to be able to be brought in, I almost need to lose who I am so that I can fit into the boys' club, if you get what I mean. And if I don't, by virtue of the fact that I don't relate to that, I'm automatically shut out. And it carries on, guys. It carries on in the way, there's research that's been done, and I'll look for the paper and I'll email it to you, Hloni, where someone looked at the disparity in income in South Africa between men and women in corporate positions. Same qualifications, same everything. And you can't tell me that, it was accidental or we didn't think about it. It's intentional that women are constantly being kept in their place, inverted commas, by men. Whether it's Black men or white men, you guys can have that debate on your own as men when you have your own men's indaba about who's more oppressed and who isn't. But the fact is, as women, we are oppressed by the man. Simple.
Agreed.
For me, I don't want us to create binaristic sort of oppositional dialogue that creates men versus women, because we generally then enter into antagonistic conversation.
But that's what we feel like, though.
Yes,
I just want to say.
Okay, no, I 100% I value that. My thinking is that the great elephant in this room is patriarchy, in that it creates these hierarchies, it sets up these barriers. And on what Hloni was saying, that the brutalizer is the most brutalized. When you look at research, much of all the perpetrators of gender-based violence, or sexual violence, have a history in their childhood relating to sexual molestation in their childhood, in the case of men, or they grew up in a violent home. So it's always this system, the brutalizing, or the system begins brutalizing you at an early age, such that the only consciousness you know is of brutality. And we, with relation to the boys' club, men have quickly understood that, listen, we cannot survive outside of the boys' club. It is what feeds us. It is what creates a common spirit among us. And the use of the boys' club is really so that men can have a space where they can let loose from all the patriarchal nonsense.
Yeah, and I agree with Nan here, because I think that I would not feel safe if I stepped into a space where men were meeting in a boys' club. I would not feel safe. I would not feel like I could enter that space, because I would feel like one of you men, general, could hurt me. True. Okay, and I just think, because we do have to bring this to a close, Nana, I know you want to say something. I agree with you that hurt people. People who've been hurt in their life, who have been beaten and abused in their life, definitely it carries there. But let me tell you the stories that I'm thinking of, the headlines. 3-year-old raped to death. Woman found hanging on tree. These are, and I understand that it must be frustrating to hear, but that is actually our reality, is that we're opening newspapers and we are seeing that women are raped to death. Women are beaten to death. And I think that there has to be a space where we can speak about that and not be told, but what about the man? Do you know what I mean?
I think we're missing it. The question is not what about the man. Yes, we are missing it. If Ubuntu was the standard through which we determine who the better person is, the black woman would be the better person because she's enabled so much life. And the white man would be found wanting because he's, by picking up on privilege, on male privilege, by using patriarchy as a tool to get ahead, he's robbed himself of the essence of being human. And so in his process of dehumanizing another, he has utterly dehumanized himself. That's what I'm saying. And so what I'm trying to say is that patriarchy kills women. And unfortunately, without knowing, the perpetrators of patriarchy are also killing themselves because they lose their ability to be human. It's suicidal, it's silly, it's stupid.
So I think, I to your point, and I'll be very quick. To your point, Hloni, I think, so you're talking about a spiritual fight to the perpetrator.
Ubuntu's philosophical and cultural and all means.
But you would have to, it's an internal thing, right? And for us, we're talking about tangible things. I don't know if I'm going to make it to next week or whatever the case is, purely because, or even if we're not talking physical violence, my mental wellness is challenged by the fact that there are these stereotypes and these thought processes in the workplace. And I guess where I start catching feelings is, I almost feel like, and I hear what you're saying about, what the man is feeling. And I'm like, but now you want to add that on top of the problems that I have, that now I must feel sorry for you because, the system doesn't work, So, yeah.
That may not be what you're saying, but it is what we could hear. Do you know what I mean? Ilse?
Yeah. Guys, this has been an incredible discussion. I think we could carry on forever. And just maybe as we close, it's just great to be able to have these discussions and acknowledge that each of us is valued and loved by God. Regardless of our views and opinions, our race, we are loved by God. And so maybe that's where we'll wrap it up. It feels a little bit like putting a plaster on a gaping wound. But I think that these conversations are not going to be closed up in one these issues are not going to be closed up in one conversation. These are conversations that we need to continue having. And so maybe that's why we'll keep it there and just apply a little plaster over it to say that we are loved by God. So I want to encourage everyone at home to just continue having conversations, to look at your homes, your institutions, your workplaces in a different way. Look at it with the eyes and the lenses of Jesus. Look at it with privilege. Look at it from the male perspective, the female perspective. And let's see what comes out of it. So continue having those discussions. And then we'll see you on Tuesday for our Tuesday night discussion. If you want to join us on Zoom, we'll send out the details later in the week. But we would really love to hear your thoughts around this topic as well. And so God bless you this week, and we hope that you have a wonderful week.